Hey everyone, this is Chappie here at Intense, and for today's video we're going to be going over how to troubleshoot and readjust our rear derailleur. There are essentially 4 modes of adjustment that we'll be going over today. 1, cable tension, probably the most common and frequent adjustment you'll have to make throughout the lifespan of the bike. Your low level or low limit adjustment, or your high level, high limit adjustment. And then lastly, our B screw tension. First and foremost, we'll go over cable tension, some of the symptoms and ways to correct it. All right, so first symptom is something that's going to be most common as your bike wears in, your cable begins to stretch as it ages, and what you're going to lose is cable tension. So this can present itself in a form of inconsistent shifting or just simply noisy and just not performing the way it should be, as you can hear here. You'll notice that I'm clicking the gear and it's still not really wanting to respond. So on this drive system, we're using the SRAM NX 12-speed drive system, and this is going to be adjusted through our barrel adjuster here. So let's talk about how this is going to adjust our cable tension. So we have our dial here. We're going to simply roll it towards us, and as we roll this adjuster towards us, that is pushing our adjuster out, which is effectively increasing our cable tension. As we roll this adjuster away from us, this is effectively reducing our cable tension. So what we'll do is we'll get our chain into the smallest gear of our cassette. This will give us a good starting point. And to be honest, I am clicking our shifter to the smallest ring of the cassette, or smallest gear of the cassette, and it's not dropping into it. So that is a really clear indication that our cable tension is not correct. In order to get the chain to drop further, we're going to reduce our cable tension. So if you remember when we were up at the shifter, we are going to be rolling that adjuster away from us. We'll continue to do that. Oh, and there we go. We've gotten it to drop onto the smallest gear of the cassette. So once we have done that, let's go ahead and use the shifter to attempt to shift the chain up through the cassette. And we're going to be checking for consistency, any clicking, grinding, or squeaking, and precision of our shifting. So inconsistent and delayed. So what we're going to want to do there is actually increase. We've gone too far, so we want to increase our cable tension in order to help our chain go up the cassette. Still looking a little slow, struggling to move up. So as you can see, it's not wanting to go up, which tells us we need to increase our cable tension. So again, we're going to roll that barrel adjuster towards us. Go back to the bottom, and we'll click through that same round of gears. And that's actually looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and look at our high level and low level adjustments. Symptom 1 for this, well, let's demonstrate our low level. So maybe everything in the middle of our cassette is shifting nice and clean and accurate and crisp, but we're noticing we're not able to get down to that smallest gear of the cassette. So what we're going to do is reset our low level adjustment. So in order to do that, we're going to attempt to drop the chain down to the smallest gear of the cassette by depressing the shifter until it no longer shifts. And then from that point, we are going to relieve our cable tension. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our T25 L wrench. Here is our cable bolt. We're going to loosen our bolt here, just enough to allow that cable to slip through freely. Now what relieving the cable tension does is eliminate the possibility of the cable tension interfering with our low level adjustment. So while we're here, let's go ahead and take the time to reset our cable tension barrel up at our shifter. So we're going to go all the way in to reduce our cable tension to the lowest amount. And then in order to give us some room for adjustment, once we hook the derailleur back up, we're going to go 1 turn back out. Let's move forward with making our adjustment. So taking a look at the back of the derailleur, we have 3 silver screws. So this is our B tension screw, which we'll address later on. This is our high level adjustment over here on rider's right hand. And on the rider's left hand side of these 2 bolts, we have our low level adjustment. So this is going to use a 3mm Allen. We're going to engage that bolt. And then because we want to reduce our low level adjustment, we are going to be loosening this screw or turning it in a counterclockwise direction. So we'll go half turn increments. We can begin to spin the drivetrain. We'll go another half turn. And there we go. We got it to drop down. So what we'll do to make sure we're properly adjusted, we'll go half a turn more. And make sure we don't hear any clicking, grinding, or squeaking. And this sounds great. We can proceed back to reaffixing our cable. We know we have the cable tension preset up at the shifter. So we'll pull a slight amount of tension onto this cable just to pull it back underneath our cable bolt. Go ahead, get this snug down. Torque that bolt down into position. We'll go ahead, spin our drivetrain again, and we'll just start clicking up through the gears. And now, you can see we drop easily down into the smallest gear of the cassette. Now what happens if your chain is dropping beyond the smallest gear of the cassette and getting bound up between the frame and our smallest gear of the cassette? Well, we're going to do that same exact adjustment, but in reverse operation. So we'll start by relieving our cable tension here. And we'd still be using that same low level adjustment screw, but instead of turning it counterclockwise, we would be turning it clockwise. And we would do that until, as we would shift through our gears, our chain will only drop to the smallest gear of the cassette and not fall off. And as you can see here, it's rubbing on the frame up here, as you can audibly hear. So what we'll do is continue to turn this screw in a clockwise direction. As you can hear, that is now nice and quiet. We'll repeat that process of reaffixing our cable with our cable bolt on the derailleur. Pull a slight amount of tension on there. Snug that bolt down. All right, so now our low level adjustment's complete. Let's move to high. So again, we see everything shifting here nice and smoothly. Uh-oh, it's not shifting up to the biggest gear of the cassette. So we're gonna take our 3mm Allen, and on this screw on the rider's right-hand side, we're going to go in half turn increments and then recheck with spinning the crank. So in a counterclockwise direction, go half turn. Oh, and that's all it took. So we'll go another half turn, and that will give us enough movement to get up onto the cassette cleanly. And we will just recheck. All right, and there you have it. That's your low level and high level adjustment. The last mode of adjustment for our rear derailleur is called our B-tension screw. Now there's many ways to go about adjusting these. These are already preset from the factory on our bikes to be right where they need to be. But the area of adjustment that this screw affects is the distance between our upper pulley wheel of our derailleur and the biggest gear of the cassette. The typical measurement with the bike static and no rider weight on it is going to be anywhere from 11 to 14 millimeters. Right now we're at about 12 millimeters, and this has been a great setup on this bike. And as long as we're in that window, we're going to get accurate shifting. Now let's kind of go over some symptoms if this was improperly set up. So with our B-tension adjustment too high, or that pulley wheel too far away from the biggest gear of that cassette, we're going to notice some really slow and unresponsive shifting. So as you can see, as we go through this, you'll hear the click and you'll see how slow it responds. Still not responding. There we go. So now with our B-tension too low, some of the symptoms that you could be experiencing are maybe you're having some good shifts down, but you're noticing a pretty measurable amount of grinding and kind of notchiness on the upshifts. Now this is something you want to be careful with, because this can actually damage your rear derailleur chain and cassette. So it's important that the B-tension screw is adjusted properly so we prevent damage and make sure that the bike's performing as intended. So with our chain in the biggest gear of that cassette, we're going to take our same 3mm Allen on this B-tension screw adjustment, and we're going to, in this case, because our B-tension is way too tight, we're going to increase it by turning this bolt in a clockwise direction. So now we're going to, now that we made this adjustment, we're going to come back down to our upper pulley wheel in the gap between the biggest gear of that cassette. And again, we're going to be referencing that 11 to 14 millimeter gap. Let's go ahead and run through the gears one more time to make sure, one, it's shifting precisely and consistently, and two, we don't have any aggressive grinding or clicking. So this looks really good. Everything's shifting consistently. The time between each click of the gear is very consistent as we go through the entire cassette, and we are able to utilize all gears. All right, so there you have it. We successfully troubleshooted and readjusted our rear derailleur. Now this can be a somewhat complicated process, but in reality, as long as you break it down step by step and really focus in on what symptoms you're experiencing, we can kind of narrow it down and make the adjustments needed. Now if you have any further questions or need any assistance throughout this process, don't hesitate to reach out. We'll be more than happy to help you out, make sure your bike's performing as intended, and that you're out on the trails having fun. Thanks for choosing Intense.